Welcome to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm Lou Rosenfeld. I'm happy you're here. And I'm also happy that my guest is here today, and that's Brandon Schauer. Brandon, hello.
Hi.
It's great to have you on the show. Brandon is someone who I would say, listeners, you might already know, but he's very quiet. Not to set up expectations too much here. Maybe he'll surprise us on this in this interview, but he's been quietly doing some really interesting things for quite a while. I think, Brandon, I might have come across your name back, at least for the first time, in 2008, when you co-authored with Peter Merholtz and Todd Wilkins and David Verba an O'Reilly book called Subject to Change. And I remember when that debuted. It's already, good Lord, 16 years plus. And you did a lot of things at a company that a lot of people listening have heard of, called Adaptive Path. You were even the CEO of that company. These days, the main thing you do is you work at Rare as a senior vice president of climate culture. And I know we want to talk a lot about that because, well, you're working with me and some other folks on a series of climate UX conversations that Rosenfeld Media has been hosting since the beginning of 2024. So that's just the tip of this quiet iceberg here of Brandon Schauer. So, Brandon, I thought it would be great to kind of start. Well, I was going to say at the beginning, I'm sure your beginning goes way, like I assume you weren't born and then went straight to writing and working with Adaptive Path. But you've got an industrial design background. Is
Yep.
it, you tell us.
Georgia Tech. Yeah. You don't have to read my LinkedIn page there. Always loved drawing. As a kid, my sister happened to go into architecture at Georgia Tech, so I went to industrial design as a neighboring field when I learned about it. But found out I wasn't as good as the materials and processes to make 3D products as I was understanding software. Happened to do Apple contest the HCI team sponsored, and that kind of hooked me for life into like this world of everything from CD-ROMs in the old days and kiosks.
CD-ROMs?
Exactly. What are those?
Aren't they pronounced C-DROMs? I guess I'm not remembering. Yeah. So okay. So you're establishing your generational position.
Bonafides.
Yep. Your bona fides. And you got an MBA along the way there too, though, right?
I did. I couldn't decide when I was going back to school whether I'd wanted to go deeper in design with a design master's or an MBA, and I went crazy with the student loans and did both. I think, well, it was probably because I didn't do that well GPA wise in undergrad, and so I just wanted to have no more dreams about missing a test and just really excel at the academic level. But it also gave me the language I was looking for to feel like I was conversant in business. Some people call MBA kind of a degree in common sense, but it's a common sense I didn't have yet. So it helped me feel a little bit more like, oh, I get why businesses are making the decisions they are. I can bring my design perspective to try to fit in or dovetail better with what's going on from the business perspective.
Well, that dream, by the way, for some of us never ends. I did get 2.5 degrees, and I'm still having that dream. That aside, what year did you get your MBA?
Gosh, 2005.
Now, when you did that, and my assumption is that was pretty rare still. Were you finding a lot of people with design backgrounds and degrees also getting MBAs at that time?
No, I think it was a easy differentiator. It at the time helped open up doors when I was interviewing, and I think that was what helped me land a role at Adaptive Path, because I think they had flirted with some MBA talent before and felt like it was something they were missing.
Yeah, I seem to remember some kind of a bunch of different CEOs and from different places over those years. Um, but let's back up a little bit. Adaptive Path, for those of
Mhm.
you who aren't familiar with it, was really a seminal UX agency. And I certainly was excited when it got started. It got started right around the time my agency started dying, 2001. But I was excited that the people who founded it, some of whom I happen to know already, were very interested, and they were more like kind of IA oriented at the time, information architecture. But IA
Mhm.
was sort of going in some interesting directions with direct lineage that would lead to UX. And so by the time you got there, I'm guessing, uh, Adaptive Path was known as one of the, if not the most successful UX forward agency. And folks, if you don't know Adaptive Path and you're interested at all in history, and if you're not interested in history, I don't know what to say, because I guess you're going to be, we'll condemn you to repeat some things. But um, the like when I think of like talent in our industry, there seems to be points in time where it collects in certain places, usually certain organizations. Like in the last few years, we've seen a lot of UX talent at places like Mural and maybe at Capital One. We'll come back to that. Uh, at different times in the UK, I've seen it at the BBC and the UK Digital Services. In the States, um, we've seen a lot of talent amass in places like Razorfish on the East Coast and Yahoo on the West Coast. I think of Adaptive Path as like the place on the West Coast of the U.S. where if you're going to look for the best UX talent, they were all there. I mean, I feel like I know half the people I know, half the Rosenfeld media authors worked at Adaptive Path at one point or another from around 2005 to the time it was acquired by Capital One.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we had a unique approach to being able to is set up well to attract talent. I don't think it exclusively had, the best talent, but I think we also had a way to amplify the talent.
Hmm. What was that way?
And yes, it was that I think from a kind of ethos perspective, I think from the seven founders, had this sense of like information should be shared and be free.
Hmm.
Also, probably a dislike of sales
Hmm.
for consulting projects. So the best approach seemed to be the rule was be smart in public spaces, be seen being smart in public spaces, and then the work could come to us. And for that reason, we had our own events. We had our own, blogs and essays and things. And um, so we really looked for talent who wanted to have that little bit of stardom to what they did, wanted to share. And I think in the end, it made them better consultants as well, because if you had to stand up and teach a workshop for half a day on IA or interaction design or what have you, you probably had to know it better than anyone else, and you would work really well in a consulting environment leading anyone else through that process. So all these things worked really well together about the things we enjoyed doing and also the things we didn't enjoy and wanted to avoid.
So, how did you take that ethos and broaden it? And I wonder if this sort of speaks to your role there, your time as the CEO, where you know, the original founders, I believe there were six or seven who were all fairly well known at the time. Seven. Uh, that's the initial pass of establishing the company was, wow, those are seven really great people. What a great
Yeah.
team. And then a few years later, you guys were what, 50 people? And
Yeah, I think we got up about that big.
yeah, and
Yeah.
but some really good people, and the founders receded, and I mean that in the best way, because it seemed like
Mhm.
there was some sort of self-awareness of the need to let the team grow and scale the the adaptive pathness of it all. Like, the team was really forward. The founders were still involved in different ways, but they didn't try to kind of crowd out the team, and that's why I'm aware personally, and I'm sure a lot of other people are, of that team, of those great people on the team that were not founders. Was that a conscious thing? Was it just an organic thing about how the team became the focus rather than the founders?
Yeah. I think it's interesting thinking about it in the context of which we were. So, company started before I arrived in 2001. There'd just been an implosion of the dot-com scene in San Francisco.
Everywhere.
So they decided, hey, let's just share an accountant, see if we can get some work, from all the people we know. They had a project to start them off, and kind of that's how these things start. Also, I wouldn't necessarily advise starting a company with 7 other people, but it gets complex fast. That being said, uh, you're in this environment then that we're moving into the Web 2.0 phase, right? We're so well located on Brandon Street, right next to South Park. The number of
San
new
Francisco,
Web
for those of
2.0
you who are
companies.
wondering, yeah, downtown
Yeah,
San
San
Francisco,
Francisco, like
kind of
you could just walk
ground
down the street
zero.
and be like, there's Blogger, there's, Odeo, there's all these different kind of startups that may not, brands that may not make sense anymore, but were really big at the time. And we got to work with a lot of them just because you ran into them at lunch and, they were your friends who you hung out with. And that allowed for a lot of experiences. And, for example, one team, including Jesse James Garrett, worked with Twitter, and they actually helped write the question on the box in the entry field that says, "What's happening?" Before then, it was, "What are you doing?" And
Hmm.
because Jesse comes from a journalist background, he thought it was way more interesting to think of it in terms of citizen journalism and what are you doing? And so this kind of environment was happening. And I think sometimes people pulled off because it was like, hey, I'd like to explore these other paths as a founder because I could go do one of these startups, because I could write a book, and really focus my energies on the one thing I'm most passionate about, because consulting can be a grind at times.
Hmm.
But I think we kept on focusing because talent was the most precious resource still, on what would draw the smart people, what would make them effective. Because at the end of the day, you're selling talent, you're selling skills. And what you've got to do is pay that person, pay the talent enough, and still have something left in between for the profit for the company,
Sure.
right? And what are you doing out of there? Well, we had a great brand. We had we had a sense of a quality formula of what could make these people successful when they work together, and we had a way of making people feel like they could be powerful consultants. They could, push clients, to do the right thing, to work, from a customer human perspective, and that all worked for us.
Well, a lot of lessons there in a way, I imagine, for people running in-house teams. Uh,
Yeah.
and although the relationship of supply and demand when it comes to talent these days, a little different than it was 20-ish years ago. What's one thing that you really look back on in your tenure as CEO that you feel great about, or maybe okay about, but it was really interesting nonetheless, and there might be a
Yeah.
good lesson for us about that.
Yeah. I think I took over at a tough time where, for many reasons, the consulting business wasn't performing well. And, I think some of it was old habits and old assumptions. And I felt really good about, using a bit of my MBA, but making it accessible to the team to go like, well, here's how the business works. Here's where we stand in terms of revenues, and here's why it's important that, we start projects on time and end them on time. I can remember one very tough thing of me bringing in the term account
Hmm.
that seemed very controversial. Like, why would we work repeatedly for the same client. That sounds boring. That sounds, not that interesting. That sounds something like a ad agency would do.
Right.
But keep on saying that enough, and eventually it becomes part of the culture and what people think through, and it ends up helping the business. And so I'm really proud of being able to, because I loved the Adaptive Path brand.
Mm-hmm.
I felt I really wanted to protect it, and to bring okay, here's what it needs to be able to survive. Here's what it needs to be able to thrive, and really going, okay, you know what? We're a pretty good consultancy, but where we'll really scale is through community, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll really scale through sharing our ideas. And let's we did the brand work internally to go, okay, well, what we're really about? We're really about creating great human experiences. And the more those we create, the better it gets.
Yeah.
And how do we help more people do that? How do we help more brands think from that perspective? Because that's how we want to win. We don't want to do the most projects. We just want to affect, the most positive change we can.
And it's hard, especially at that time, I would gather you were starting to see a lot of competition from established consultancies who were suddenly like, oh, this UX stuff is actually real. Let's throw a little attention that way. Um, suddenly you have to stand out from the
Yeah.
copycats. And that's something that I think a lot of people, this is why I lean into the history, although we're going to move away from it in just a moment.
Yeah.
But looking back, because if you're new to this field, it's hard sometimes to understand just how different it was such a short time ago. 10 years ago, 15 years ago is really not that long in the lifespan of an industry. But then you start seeing that there are industries that not only change radically in such a short amount of time, but may even go away. I've seen that happen in other contexts. So it's good. Thank you for sharing a bit of that history, Brandon. And it's wonderful to see that your passion for the brand and what it's for is still so strong. And it's a nice feeling for me to see that, because I think that there's not a lot of that these days, and that makes me sad. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, I think it's good to start looking ahead, specifically to the work that we're seeing, doing, and that's coming up in our conversations around climate science and the climate crisis and how these things relate to user experience design. So we'll be right back after break. You're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. See you in a sec. I'm going to give you 5 reasons you should be using the Rosenverse. First one, where else are you going to find 100 events that you can attend for free every year, 2 a week, about product management, product design, and UX design, plus a highly engaged Slack-based community of over 13,000 of your peers. What else are you going to find in the Rosenverse? You'll find hundreds and hundreds of recordings of conference presentations and community session recordings, all in one place from a single search browser interface. And behind those hundreds of recordings are hundreds of experts, people who have advanced the field, people who are your peers who are doing interesting new things, all in one place. Why else should you use the Rosenverse? We've been advancing the field of UX since 2005. You're going to find the most advanced content on such topics as design operations and program management, UX research, and a host of other topics, from climate UX to civic design to how designers can work better in product organizations. Lastly, you've been trusting our content since we started back in 2005. Whether it's our books, our conferences, our community sessions, well, we think you're going to trust the way we've brought those all together so that you can spend less time searching and browsing and more time learning and benefiting. I hope you'll try out the Rosenverse, and I hope you'll consider upgrading to a gold paid membership because it brings you a lot more. Not only do you have access to hundreds and hundreds of recorded conference presentations, but you also get access to the Rosenbot, which is a ChatGPT 4 level chatbot that we've been training on all of our content, including our growing collection of nearly 60 books and counting. It's all there, it's all great content, and the Rosenbot is a cutting-edge way to get at it. You can try the gold membership out with a trial for 2 weeks. Give it a try. Hope you like it. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld talking with Brandon Schauer. We had a blast of history, and hey, look, I was a history major in college, so don't hold it against me, folks. But I do think it's interesting to see where we're coming from. What's changed, what's the same, and where we might be going. Now, Brandon, your story's been fascinating because, we left you before the break as the CEO of Adaptive Path, and now you're in this role, Senior Vice President of Climate Culture. I bet you're the only one out there with that title at Rare. So what's this about, and can you connect the dots a bit so we understand that progression, that story from there to here?
Yeah, the time machine. How do we get there from here? So Adaptive Path, and I believe it was 2014, was acquired by Capital One, the US bank. I would still do that again. I think it was a smart and sensible move, and it's where the industry was at the time, where the design world was at the time. It was moving in-house, so we did it as well. As a large group, and it's a great honor to do it with a group of people I loved working with. But as we integrated into Capital One, I moved from San Francisco to DC with a little bit of a thinking, long range career arc. I may end up in something that feels more larger purpose. I really loved helping people on one of the three things that kept them up at night, which is your relationships, your health, or your money. And helping people through money things was really great. But the thing keeping me up at night was climate. That's the thing I kept on being curious about. And the more I learned, the more concerned I became.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led me to start looking around of like, okay, well, what could my role be? And I probably spent a year just going, there's nothing in between what I do in design and user experience and climate other than helping fundraising funnels for nonprofits. And I thought I was just going to have to give up. And I ran across a wonderful job description at Rare for leading this program. It said nothing about design, but I read all the bullets. And it's like, I know how to do most of those things. I might have to fake a couple. And I happened to see that on their board was the leader of the D School. And it's like, oh, good.
Stanford
They
D
know
School.
something about design. Yes,
Yeah.
Stanford's D School. So I reached out to her, and the rest is history.
Well, tell us about the role. I mean, were you
Yeah.
doing pretty much what you're doing now back when you started at Rare? And what's your remit? What are you trying to accomplish?
Yep. Rare, historically, it's almost a 50-year-old organization now, works a lot like way in the field. So restoring fisheries, improving soil management with farms. But this is their first time to move into like, what can we do in the US? Because we're the biggest emitters. So they'd done some research and found from a behavioral perspective, because behavior sciences is one of the great strengths and capabilities they have, is said, well, what can we do in the US to address our huge emissions that we have per capita? And luckily they found out, hey, it's not a list of 100 things that we as Americans would have to do to have an impact. It's actually 6 or 7 things that really could have a big impact in how we live, what our lifestyles are. It's basically how we eat, how we power our lives, how we get around, right? And brought me on to say, okay, we've gone this far with the research. We have some ideas of some spaces we might want to work in, but what do we do now? And so for the past 5 years, roughly, I've been building and working with the team to find out, let's pilot a lot, let's experiment in a lot of spaces, and let's figure out um, what are powerful places to work. So we've tried banking. That didn't work out.
Hmm.
But
Interesting.
we tried to integrate a sense of where your emissions are as a human being based on your spending. Turns out most customers don't want their banks to do that job for them, or at least not 4 years ago when we were trying it. We worked with employers to create kind of like green benefits programs. Those were really effective, but we found it hard to find enough employers who are really interested in that. It was a long, long sales cycle, and maybe ultimately was something a for-profit rather than a nonprofit should maybe do if you need a big sales force to pull it off. But we've been really effective in places like entertainment
Hmm.
because seeing something on screen, we learn from people just like we learn from people in our own lives. Like if they do something and it works out well, or they do something and works out poorly, we kind of internalize that because we're still using our old, 10,000-year-old brains when we perceive how people are behaving. And so you can help normalize things like, oh, look, they're driving an EV and that's normal. They chose not to eat beef and it paid off for them in
Hmm.
this show. So sometimes we work with unscripted shows where they are intentionally cooking or remodeling a house where some changes can be made. Sometimes it's fiction and it's just mainstream characters doing these things normally. And
Interesting.
the testing shows it has an impact. People notice their beliefs shift about what's normal. What did other people do when we test it? A/B test it, the scene with it, the scene without it, and it matters.
It's almost, I want to say inverse product placement, but it's not really inverse. It's just sort of
We call it behavior placement.
love it. Behavior
Yeah.
placement. Well, okay. So your skills as someone with an MBA, I'm sure have been very helpful there. How's being a designer been helpful?
Ooh. Yeah. I think ever since becoming a CEO, you back away from, these days you would call it the Figma or whatever,
Hmm.
right? Where you're hands-on. But I tend to solve most problems from how do I design this, even if it's a spreadsheet,
Hmm.
right? Because we all design other things. You design your closet at home, right? And so I still figure out like who's the user. Okay, if you're interacting with us as a helper to integrate behavior science into your scenes, how do you want to interact with that? What are your needs in those moments? What are going to be the useful ways for us to surface the information that you most need? These are AI problems, or excuse me, IAA problems,
Well, everything is, of
information
course, but
architecture problems,
yep.
right? And their interaction design problems and that sort of thing. So it just helps me to be able to work with, you know, insufficient amounts of information to envision different futures that could be, and then to help people figure out how to assemble, pilots to those futures, but from the perspective of the person who most matters, who is usually, you know, the user of that system, the screenwriter who we want to work with, the trainee who we're helping get into a solar job because
Hmm.
that's another space we happen to work in. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Actually, that's a really good foundation for maybe the next part of our conversation, which is um, designers of all, small d designers of all types getting into, well, not necessarily getting into the climate space or the sustainability space, but at least being mindful of it and bringing it into what they do in their current jobs. So there's not just becoming a climate designer, but also a maybe climate conscious designer and everything on the spectrum
Mhm.
in between. We've been trying to explore those areas in the Climate UX series that you and I and Victor Lombardi and Alexis O and Olga Hrustaleva have been putting together. We just since the beginning of 2024. It's a monthly series. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. But we've been exploring this whole spectrum of the intersection of climate and UX. For you, I mean, I think of you as like one of the most experienced people here when it comes to the intersection. What are you seeing as the directions that people can go in if they want to be impactful as
Yeah.
designers in this space? And are there principles or other forms of um, knowledge that can guide us? What's
Yeah.
important to know?
Yeah, it's so interesting because every time you look at a problem, sometimes you see yourself in the center. So my first thoughts when we started exploring this space together, Lou and you, me, and the rest of the gang, was like, we just need more people to switch their jobs from whatever they're doing, from whatever, tech platform or service, what have you, into working into climate.
Hmm.
And I think quickly we heard back like, where are the climate jobs though? There are no climate jobs for design. The same problem I saw 5 years ago. And so I've decreased in thinking that is really the model that is more thinking about, okay, there are a lot of designers in the world. Um, I tend to think of UX designers as having soft power,
Hmm.
right? They may not own the biggest budget. They may not have the most people working for them. They may not have the most control over the product. But as I think Jared Spool used to say, design is the rendering of intent. Like we control the pencil though,
Hmm.
and say, hey, here's what should be, here's what could be, uh, as well as here's what human beings can actually, here's where the need is, here's how we will support it. And so I think if you think of that from that perspective, there's a lot of opportunity for designers to not just change jobs, but think about how they include issues of climate, issues of carbon emissions, issues of sustainability into the work they do every day. So one of the things I encourage is like, hey, if you're building a user flow, if you're building a user journey, service blueprint, whatever it is, identify or have a swim lane in that for carbon emissions, just as you might also think for equity issues. But find where is the carbon actually being created. Is more of it related to the shipment point of your product? Is more of it related to the AI that's being engaged, because
Hmm.
that's a big emitter? Where actually is it and how would you address it? And also, is it a part of complexity that you could take away from the user? Like you don't have to worry about because I've helped solve that. And I can just help actually just make you feel good about it. Like we've saved the equivalent of, one car trip by doing this with you this way. We've saved the equivalent of, you know, uh, uh, acre of the forest, whatever it
Right.
might be. Equivalency is a great way of explaining things of the value you're doing there. So I think that's one pathway is work within the job you have. There's some great guides from Project Drawdown on job functions and action guides for product design. Other things have happened as just kind of different examples. Emily Cunningham, a UX designer and researcher at Amazon. She formed Amazon Employees for Climate Justice and actually drove Amazon to create a climate plan and launch the Climate Pledge. So that's a huge impact. May not be everyone's way of doing things. On the other end, we met through our panels, Nancy Zhang at Google, who she started integrating carbon emissions into that Google Flights experience. When you look at
Hmm.
flights through Google, and started showing that some flights have lower carbon emissions than others, and just brought that sense, I think, into people's minds of, oh yeah, travel, carbon emissions, climate, that's a thing. I should maybe travel smarter. And it went on to, because she did that, a new sustainability team was formed, and that team is now working across flights, hotels, and travel in general. And so, little decisions by designers who that soft power can have a really big impact over time.
Well, and I think we always expect that if we don't have hard power, if that's the right term, we can
Yeah.
have no impact. So I'm glad that you have that framing of soft power, and it makes me think about some of the things you've just mentioned, like the work on Google Flights, for example, or like when I rent a car from Enterprise, they always have a carbon offset option. Those are little things, and like they may not necessarily seem like a big deal to the customer, the client, the user, or even the designer, but they are maybe good in that they are normalizing our thinking about like that climate becomes a topic in the most mundane quotidian interactions, right? Like if I go to another car rental place now and I see that they don't have a carbon emissions offset option, I might go like, well, why not? What's wrong with them? It's everyone else is getting this. And so like I guess on one hand there's a concern that we just, it becomes a little too mindless. Like, oh, well, I did my duty. I checked that box for carbon offsets. And on the other hand, if those things become more prevalent to the point where they're expected, then you'll know designers have had an impact.
Yeah. Yep. You mentioned the single action bias. It's kind of the I gave it the office mentality. But you also use a very important other behavior science word of expected. Like if I sense others expect me to act that way because it's how I'm seeing others do things, or if I acknowledge that that's the norm, people shift very, very quickly. There's a principle called dynamic norms, whereby even if it's been normal to, let's say, eat meat for every meal, but you sense that a group around you that you care about are starting to move, they don't even have to have had moved. If you just have a sense that the norm is starting to change, you change very quickly, and we don't have to explain all the climate science to you. You're just like, nope, nope, that was the old way. This
Right.
is the thing people are doing now. We're really social beings.
Maybe we don't know. Yeah, exactly. We may not know the specifics, the specifics behind the change, but we are very, very aware of the changes. Brandon, this is so fantastic to learn about your work, historically as well as currently. Before we wrap up, what did you bring for our listeners?
Ooh, yeah, you said to bring a gift. So I want to bring a gift of my favorite climate scientist to follow. Her name is Catherine Hayhoe, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, and she just has an incredibly folksy, plain way of talking about climate, her relationship to climate, but also gives great insights of how you can talk to other people about it. Plus, she's able to break down the science in a very approachable way. So I encourage, she spends a lot of time on Thread. She's on LinkedIn and other spaces. But if you're looking for like, how do I step into the space? Just learn a bit more. So I feel like I have a few of the tools, whether it's in my life or whether it's in my work. Great resource, great place to start.
Thank you for that. Sounds like the Tim Walls of the climate world. And thank you, more importantly, for your years of quietly impactful leadership. It's certainly appreciated, even if it's not necessarily realized. Brandon, it's been great to have you on the show, and looking forward to working with you in years to come, and that you are incredibly successful with your main goals in the years to come. Thank you for inspiring us.
Thank you, Lou. And I just love the design community. I love the set of assumed values you can have with the community here about what matters through our work and what matters in the day. So thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Lou. Thank you for listening to the latest Rosenfeld Review podcast. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear from you. And if you want to pop me an email, lou@rosenfeldmedia.com, tell me what you thought. Better yet, leave me the hell alone and post a review on your favorite podcast platform. please feed the algorithm. It really does make a difference. We want to get the word out. If you like the word, give us a hand. And while I'm asking you for favors, don't forget, buy books. Support your favorite local independent publisher. We happen to be one, rosenfeldmedia.com. All those great UX books are there. So, thanks again.